So I'm the first to admit I'm a bit of a novice when it comes to television. I can't keep up with all the new shows that come out, and I still haven't seen all the big ones that it seems everyone has seen. But I've been getting through them. The Sopranos, obviously, Breaking Bad, The Wire, Better Call Saul, Fargo, Game of Thrones, and Boardwalk Empire are some of the big ones I've watched. I recently finished Succession, and I thought I might as well do True Detective next. It would be a great way to potentially avoid getting bogged down in an inconsistent show, because from what I've heard, it has one masterful season, one disappointing one, which it seems has been getting some re-evaluation in recent years, one decent season, and one horrific one. So I could just watch the first season and check out. Putting aside the actual storylines themselves, getting two Hollywood stars and plunging them into a murder mystery over the course of 8 episodes or so is such a great idea for a recurring anthology series. And it's a shame the show seems to have caused people so much pain. Season 1 is pretty much unanimously considered one of the greatest seasons of television, period. It's constantly brought up in the conversation, and as such I felt compelled to check it out. So the first season stars Matthew McConaughey as former detective Rust Cohle and Woody Harrelson as former detective Marty Hart. In the year 2012, they are brought in separately by two detectives who want to speak to them about a homicide case they worked on in 1995. The two former detectives narrate the story of their investigation, which begins with finding the body of a young murdered woman who appears to have been killed and displayed in some kind of ritualistic fashion. The narrative, as you'd imagine, is shrouded in mystery, and not just in the obvious way you'd expect from a murder mystery. The way the two detectives talk, incidents they mention in passing, it's clear some very big things happened on the case. Not just the case itself, but something happened between the two men. Something in 2002 that keeps getting brought up. That sense of mystery and anticipation is a key narrative drive of the season. It's like an itch that gnaws away at you throughout the season. You just want to know what happened. Why are they acting the way they are in interviews? Why is there an atmosphere of unease? Why are the two questioning detectives constantly shooting each other looks? Cohle is an unpopular figure who rubs his contemporaries the wrong way, Marty in particular. He is constantly coming out with philosophically pessimistic lines. A quick "time is a flat circle" from Cohle will be rebuffed by an exasperated look from Marty, who will tell him to please stop saying weird shit. One of Cole's more interesting lines is, "I think human consciousness is a tragic misstep in human evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law. We are things that labour under the illusion of having a self, a secretion of sensory experience and feeling, programmed with total assurance that we are each somebody, when in fact everybody's nobody. I think the honourable thing for our species to do is deny our programming, stop reproducing, walk hand in hand into extinction, one last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal." Another notable example is when the duo watch a church pastor whip up a crowd, and the nihilistic Cohle observing and saying, "Transference of fear and self-loathing to an authoritarian vessel. It's catharsis. He absorbs their dread with his narrative. Because of this, he's effective at proportion to the amount of certainty he can project. Certain linguistic anthropologists think that religion is a language virus that rewrites pathways in the brain, dulls critical thinking." So as you can imagine, Cohle isn't the easiest person to be around. Some of the stuff he comes out with is interesting. I mean, philosophy, epistemology, ontology, that stuff is fascinating, and it's cool when characters in the show bring up high concepts like these and play off one another. But then again, sometimes Cohle does come off as an angsty, brooding teenager who read one philosophy book and carries around Cormac McCarthy novels and now looks beneath everyone around him. The "I am 14 and this is deep" meme comes to mind. Still though, this is part of the point of the character, and intrinsic to his evolution, as we learn, for example, that some of his outlook is brought about by a traumatic past, the death of a child, a significant amount of time undercover with vicious gangs, drug taking which causes him hallucinations even now. Marty is a far more easygoing and charismatic detective, a family man with a wife and 2 beautiful daughters. But it becomes apparent that he is a serial cheater, an issue which spills into his home life, causing chaos and making Marty turn to the bottle. So, I've been talking about the show for a few minutes now and only fleetingly have mentioned the actual murder mystery itself, which is indicative of the quality of the show. The things around the mystery are very interesting. Rust's past, Marty's home life, their conflicting philosophical outlooks. You don't expect to turn on a murder mystery show and come across characters debating the nature of the self. And many a time we'd be frustrated with a detective show delving into the home life of its main characters. But here it feels intrinsic to the story. The show gets the boring stuff right, is probably how I'd describe it. These are layers and layers that showrunners can afford to add to their show, given the amount of runtime they have to play with, and they use it well. Even the investigation itself, the mundane parts, don't come off as dull. I have flashbacks to Lester and Prez sitting in their basement office listening to wiretaps in The Wire, which should be mind-numbingly dull, but isn't. Similarly, a key part of the investigation in True Detective is when the duo suspect that the man they're after might be a painter, so they interview the wife of a deceased homeowner who had his home painted in the area. They ask if her husband paid his taxes. They check the tax records, find payments made to a contractor company, find that company's address, and that's a key way in which the case is solved. There's even a half hour or so where it becomes a gritty action show. Rust going undercover once again and involved in an operation in the hood, pretending to be a part of a neo-Nazi gang. It was a thrilling part of the show that makes you wish there was a spin-off of Cole's younger days mixing with cartels, and ultimately a flavour, an ingredient into this show which ultimately leaves you with a filling feeling. In terms of the murder mystery, the case is wrapped up until a routine interrogation in an unrelated case causes Cohle to doubt that the story of the young murdered woman has ended, but his attempts to reopen the case causes friction in the department. Cohle laments, diving deeper and deeper into the case, seeing how deep the rabbit hole goes, how high in society the suspects become. I had a really good time with True Detective. The 2 central characters were great to watch and the actors did superb jobs. That being said, and I'm sure this is going to sound like blasphemy given True Detective Season 1's unshakable reputation, but I did come away from the show feeling like I didn't like it as much as I wanted to like it. I fully acknowledge that this was in part due to the hype. Everywhere you go, on YouTube videos and forums discussing TV shows, the first season of True Detective is held up on a pedestal where it stands alone, high and mighty. And that hype can have an effect. It did have an effect. If this was a random show I found on a late night, I'd be singing its praises, but because I've approached it knowing its reputation, I think it's caused damage. And can you blame me when the Daily Beast calls it one of the most riveting and provocative series, or Alan Sepinwall says it's a potentially fascinating shift in dramatic series television? Even subconsciously, I found myself thinking, how can it really be that good at 8 episodes? And it was good, but I don't think it's beyond criticism, and I didn't actually fully like how it all came together. And to be honest, and I'm not saying this is necessarily what happened, but sometimes because subsequent seasons are so bad, it can make you look back on earlier brilliant work in an even more favourable light, even if at the time you did have problems with it. So I'd be interested to see if anybody shares my criticisms. Let me know in the comment section below. I think it's the final episodes I have issues with many threads receiving unsatisfying conclusions. Spoilers here, of course. But it's always felt like the show was building to something, that intensity I spoke about, the feeling that something went down and we're going to find out what it was. The revelations never matched the hype, like what went down between Rust and Marty. The issue eventually being that Rust banged Marty's wife felt a little ordinary after all that impressive atmosphere was built up. It's not necessarily disappointing, it's just, oh, that was it the whole time. Let me give you an example. There's a creepy episode ending that ends with a haunting image of a man wearing a gas mask and holding a machete emerging from some backwater swampy area, while Cohle narrates, like a lot of dreams, there's a monster at the end of it. It's creepy and it evokes unease. But when we meet the man and his partner, he's just another bum spouting the time is a flat circle and I can see the demon behind your eye stuff. The murder mystery itself too. I'm a sucker for conspiracy movies where it turns out there's so many people in on it, and it's refreshing and realistic that the detectives don't get all the men in the end, just their man. But I couldn't help but feel a ting of unfortunate traditional familiarity with a dime a dozen movies and shows, seeing our villain in the end being a fat hillbilly who is chased through an elaborate contrived labyrinth like an 80s B-movie baddie. We went from drug-fueled occult cabals spanning the entire state and protected by the powers that be, with members so devoted they either kill themselves or are offed if they might be compromised, to an inbred redneck fingering his sister and mowing the occasional lawn. Rust's evolution as well. I mean, he's such a compelling character, stalked by darkness, a tortured soul, and there is a climax to his growth, but I couldn't help but feel underwhelmed that Rust did eventually believe in some form of cosmic entity, just because he had a subjective near-death experience and quote-unquote felt the presence of his dead daughter. I mean, again, was that it? He's a believer now, just off that one experience, which was beyond reason, which could have been injury-induced trauma. It could have been the drugs the hospital gave him. If that happened to somebody else, Rust would be the first person to criticize it and rip apart that man's belief. It just plays into a tired stereotype of the rational skeptic atheist versus the theist whose ideals only ever come from an irrational belief, illogical faith, and hope that there's something out there. And he goes from being on one side of the fence to the other. Does he now no longer believe human consciousness is a tragic misstep in human evolution, just because he had a feeling that he interpreted as his daughter? His earlier musings in the show now have an extra level of cringe attached to them, because now you're well aware that this man is a bump in the head away from 180ing his opinions on life and the universe, that his nihilism was just undiagnosed depression this whole time. I felt there was much more there. I mean, after all, the duo's competing worldviews and philosophies were the core of the show, but it was easily wrapped up by Cole's ho-hum near-death experience, taking down one of the many bad guys he's faced in his life, and his subsequent corny Disney movie "She's With Me" speech. And I say that as a theist. I just feel what Cohle should have encountered that managed to shake his worldview should have been unfathomable, awe-inspiring, and dark. But again, just fat hillbillies. So all in all, a great show, but not one that I'd put on such a high pedestal as it seems many do. What do you make of this show, and do you think I should continue with the next seasons? Let me know in the comment section below, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.